Well, here we are again, albeit for the first time this year, the release of a new book, this time Celestial Coup. So that's book 3 in this series after Gift of the Mancynn and The Arc of Angels, with there also being one more coming out in May later this year, because it's every 3 months, the last Saturday of the month, but focus on Celestial Coup for the moment, because that is the next direct one in line. Obviously I don't have a physical copy of it yet, although that will be soon. But either way though, like today I did receive the kind of proofing for the paperback cover, so hopefully that's all going to be good and approved and that can all be sent off and I can have my author preview copy that I can then use for the live stream, which we always do on the days of release, which, yeah, I'm muddling about the order of saying things. Let's announce now, clarify, I already said it was the last Saturday in a month, so yes, that'll be on Saturday, the 27th of February 2021. You'll be able to get this book in both paperback and ebook editions as per usual. Ebook will be the exact same price as normal. Paperback will be inherently slightly higher because it's more pages, each book is getting longer each time, so that is a higher printing cost as well, but still should be within that reasonable progression. But then yes, also as I was saying with the live streams on the 27th itself, as ever, unless something else comes up in the meantime, and I'll make that clear, but plan would be that midday GMT on 27th I'll do a live stream for a couple of hours, reading some extracts from the book as well as talking about some different things, interacting with the chat and all of that fun stuff to mark the occasion. That then, to just hammer home the contextualization, is 2 weeks from today, so if you were to buy the first 2 books right now, if you haven't read them already and you're interested in the third one, or even if you're not, just want to read the first ones, then I would advise you do so, but if you order them now, they'll probably arrive in time. That, again, it depends on how fast of a reader you are, but again, if you're going to look at this one, I'd advise going those first. And it is just in the case that you haven't read those yet and we've not finished them yet, that as we now progress into the overview side of this video, are we trying to keep this as spoiler-free for the specific events of the previous 2 books as possible, although there may be some things that you can infer if you could really think about it, but just try to have a spoiler-free overview of both the new book and, as I say, any of the twists and turns in the previous ones. We can confirm, first of all, that our protagonist, Philip Quint, is still around and in this story, so he being the latest in a line of Mancyns, to have gone into detail before in other videos, whatever, but say someone who has had their DNA at like a fetal stage adapted to also contain ziangg, which we might think of crudely as dark matter or prima materia or any of these other things, such that he now has the capabilities to, within certain parameters, manipulate reality around him. And this is all so that very soon, relative to the books, which remember are set in 2016, which is why that's in the title year thing, and again, across the Ragnarok Chronicles, we're going to be having lots of different stories in different years throughout history. Around that time, the otherworldly Brethren Lords are wanting him to ultimately use his abilities as emissary for them on Earth as they enact their great plan, which still isn't specifically revealed in its entirety in the books yet, that involves getting the planet into a state that it can be used as part of their stratagem in the larger multiversal conflict that's been going on for eons, albeit more recently in kind of more of a Cold War state. It's kind of in a lull at the moment, even though tensions still exist. Regarding Philip's allegiance towards the Brethren Lords and their plan, that from the beginning of the first book has kind of been here and there, moving backwards and forwards, but now we see in this book that he really doesn't have control over his own actions, the same capability to reject the orders that might be given to him, and as such he is now potentially a threat to his other companions who have been travelling with him, as you know, they're acting against the Lords, and he is now more easily open to becoming their involuntary puppet. As such, these companions, who in turn at the start of this book are already having to deal with the fact that one of their number has gone missing and they don't know what happened to them, they're also having to adapt to the fact that, having returned to the present, because if we listen to any of the promotional stuff about Book 2, The Arc of Angels, as I said, that was more of a time travel element, they've returned to the present, and it's now they're not where they're used to being, however. They find themselves in this old, kind of grand abandoned house that ultimately over the course of this story and the next one is acting like their base of operations, having to adapt to live here, kind of hunker down and work out what to do. So that is actually a way in which books 3 and 4 are kind of different from books 1 and 2, which I think does kind of prompt a slight tonal difference in the books as well, in that in books 1 and 2, or in all of the books, even in these subsequent ones, we're still jumping around the world and doing other places. Like in this one specifically, in fairness, a fair bit of it is now in England, but we do also see Canada and the States and India as well as space. But in those first ones, when they were going to these different places, it was more kind of, they were generally travelling around, and then they may happen to come across circumstances in those places, or they had no choice but to go there. Now that they have a base of operations, this abandoned house, it's much more of they are taking an active lead in the steps when they choose, we're going to go on this mission to this place, and then when they come back it feels a lot more organised, and rather than just kind of meandering about or say being forced to go in different directions, they have a much better grasp of what's happened to them, even if they don't necessarily want to be in this place in a situation in the first place. But they have more agency, and there's more control, and there's more order, coherence to what's going on. In turn, they're not actually alone in this house either. Some potential allies, but it will depend on the individual and the mood and the moment and other factors. But some potential allies that they have met previously in the stories now come back in more of a recurring role, as they are now occupying the house as well, kind of being put to work in their service, although again there are a patchwork of opinions on the main characters that are being held. And really that's kind of helping them there, there's stuff going on there. Meanwhile, outside of the house, not only are they getting a better sense of just how many humans the Brotherland Lords have an influence over, conscious or subconsciously, because kind of a lot of the places they're going around at the moment in this book specifically is going after human agents of the Brotherland Lords to try to gather intel on what the Lord's plan is that way. But also we're now seeing there are other threats emerging as well that may be just as mysterious, if not more so. Unknown beings that are pursuing them, beings that may be able to hide in their midst, beings that are secretly returning from something long before any of what these current characters had been a part of. We're also, though, getting just as much of the known entities as well, not the entities, but, you know, individuals. Mierdi, who didn't have as much of a role in book 2, definitely comes back in force in this book 3, Celestial Coup. She has a much more prominent role here. We'll see a lot more of her. This also leads on to us seeing more of how Gryal is balancing his allegiance towards her versus his otherwise duty of position in leading the Brethren Lords and his brothers in doing what their plan has been for so long, and how there's a struggle of trying to fulfill both roles simultaneously, yet that's not always possible. Sometimes things are just mutually exclusive and he's having to make decisions as to how best to handle those situations. In the previous book, we started to see that there were some kind of tensions and fractures forming between the Brethren Lords as it was, but in this book, even further, other steps have been taken. Certain individual has been kind of taken down a step very much and shown the error of his ways. Meanwhile, another one is starting to end up going down his own line of questioning of what it is exactly they're doing right now and if there's something better they should be doing instead. So that's leading to some kind of disconnect between everything that's happened on the Towers side of things. And all the while, throughout all of this, we have the notion of the coup, per the title of the book, although for our main characters specifically, it may be something that they're more skirting around the periphery of before they really understand what it is actually that's also now going on. With the Brethren Lords, to say, they have their plan to use Earth in the multiversal conflict, and they have kind of a timeline for that. However, it now turns out that another side in the conflict, because there's multiple sides, is actually potentially going to set things off sooner than even the Brethren Lords would have planned. There is word of an imminent uprising by a certain faction against the otherwise more peaceful regime that rules over their people, and if these kind of devout warriors are able to succeed in this and take over and shift their people's societal alignment back towards a more aggressive stance against the entities and whoever, because it's usually the entities that have ticked people off, that, I'd say, could spark an even sooner resurgence in the conflict, which even the Brethren Lords want to stop. So, because again, they want their version of intended events to go down. They don't want someone else throwing a spanner in the works. So as such, kind of everyone is trying to work out from kind of signals that are being received what exactly is going to happen and how can it be stopped. This though requires kind of cracking encryptions and interpretation of the language and other hidden messages. But all throughout that, there is though one thing that remains clear, a sentiment that is consistent. Believe in the revolution. So, with that, will the characters believe in it? Will you believe in the revolution? In general, will anyone be able to stop this mysterious coup that's about to take place? Can I find out where and how and when? More down to earth? Will Philip be able to still be trusted by his companions around them? Again, can he keep control over himself? Or is he now too much of a liability? What happens kind of from his internal standpoint regarding himself now that he's losing control of himself and losing touch with his companions since they're trying to distance themselves now that he's a potential threat? How does that manifest from his point of view? How well will the other characters be able to do, trying to now kind of decide where they're going to go, try to track down the Lord's human agents to get information from them? Again, especially now that they're also stuck in this new strange location, as this abandoned house with these other maybe allies, maybe not. We'll have to see kind of beings around them at the same time. And all the while also, the clock is nevertheless still ticking on the Brethren Lord's own plan as well. Whether or not the coup goes ahead, although ideally the coup doesn't go ahead, everything that they have been preparing humanity for, getting us towards a technological state where the Earth can be reframed towards their purposes, that's not just going to suddenly stop. They still want everything to go into those final stages to be ready for their execution of their plan, of which again Philip is also a part. The imagery on the cover of the first book had Philip and Gryal specifically dispersing into sand, because within that book there was the notion of Egypt. The second book had them dispersing into kind of ice and frost, because it was a snowy landscape that they ended up on when they were sent to search for the Ark. On this cover, they're turning into blood. And also you may notice a progression in the actual posturings of the characters themselves. What might that indicate of the arc that's going on? All of this, again, for the specific details or to see how accurate any suppositions you might be, for that, yes, you're going to have to get the book for yourself when it comes out, saying 2 weeks from today, if you're watching this when the video goes up. So Saturday the 27th of February 2021 on paperback and ebook forms from Amazon. As ever, after the release, the link will be put retroactively into the descriptions of all of these videos. I think soon, rather, because eventually we're going to have too many links. We'll have to see what would people prefer. I could end up, again, by the end of it, just having 4 separate links in the description, 1 for each book. Or I could do is I could just link my author page, which would list all of the books individually, but it'd just take a few more steps to then find the book. What would we prefer? Anyway, there's that. You can buy it if you want. Check out the live stream if you can on the day itself. Once again, you also have the previous 2 books if you haven't read those yet. And in the meantime, this is all for the Ragnarok Chronicles that we are gradually building our way through. We will also, as well as experiencing the upcoming direct releases, also with this channel, be discussing what's happening in the future of the franchise, what's in the backstory of the franchise, what's going on elsewise in the franchise, as is the usual nature of these videos, as we will be getting back to with this week's, i.e. Thursday's, new video as well. If you'll join us again for that, or in the meantime, if you check out some other videos that have been done on the channel as well. This week we had the Game of Thrones Making a Sequel Part 1, which spent a lot of time on, so I'd really also, I mean, obviously first priority, appreciate the books, but also if you have the time as well to either watch that video or either read the Google Doc with the breakdown I included in the description as well. But whichever you do, whatever happens, the main thing is, as ever, to just remember to keep on telling stories. I'll see you in 2 weeks for the release.